Welcome back to A Fresh Story, the podcast where we have conversations about brave decisions to start over again. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Olivia, and we're so glad you're here today.
Hello there.
Hey, Sissy, how's it going?
Ooh, you never call me Sissy. I always call you Sissy.
Oh, I changed it up today.
You changed it up. It's going really well. I'm actually pretty excited. I just got finished ironing, which is something I never do.
Yeah, I walked in on her ironing.
I don't iron. I don't wear clothes enough to be ironed.
It was very
the
risque.
thing that I will iron. The thing that I will iron is when I was with Thomas in Scotland last visit, we realized that one of the things that we would like as a couple is cloth napkins, which is so goofy, but we use napkins every night.
With the ambition.
I know, we're so wild. We use paper towels every night for dinner. It felt like a waste. You only need like a dozen to get you through a week, really, as a couple. It's 2 of you, 14. If you do laundry once a week. And I was like, let's think about that. And I thought maybe I'd make my mom make some and like force her to make some. She keeps trying to push it back on me. No, you're capable. I'm like, no, you're capable. And then I was cleaning out some stuff and I found napkins that my grandmother had that I had taken, cloth napkins, when I had moved her out of her house. Not moved her, when we had emptied her house after she passed away. And I was like, these are perfect. And I think there's such an instinct to be like, well, don't use them because they're an heirloom. But you know what? They were napkins. They were meant to be used. Yeah. So I washed them and they all came out incredibly wrinkled. Because of course my grandmother would have cloth napkins that would come out wrinkled. So I was ironing those and it made me feel very connected to her. I think that she would be very excited to learn that my napkins are going to be making the journey to Scotland eventually.
Yeah.
And got us thinking about our grandmother and talking about our grandmother, which gets us into our guest today, who was very connected to her grandmother, and who the grandmother had a fascinating story, as does Anna.
Fascinating story. We talked to Anna. Anna came to us again via marketing Twitter. In case anybody hasn't known this, I love my marketing Twitter community. They're an amazing group of people. And so Anna came to us and Anna had some real career pivots. And we talked about burnout and parenting during the pandemic and really trying to find your way when you're trying to figure your own stuff out. And she had this beautiful story about this connection, this spiritual connection with her grandmother and how it really kind of helped her on her journey. And we talked about her grandmother was a really awesome woman, and we talked about that, and she lit up, and we talked about her writing and all this stuff. So it was a fantastic conversation, and we were so honored that she shared all of that with us. So please enjoy Anna's episode, and please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to A Fresh Story so that we can keep telling all of your fresh start stories. Anna is a freelance writer with expert level experience in banking and technology and a workflow consultant and a self-proclaimed productivity geek, which we love.
Anna, we are so excited to have you here today. How are you, first of all?
I am wonderful. Cheers to the beginning of the new year.
Yes. Cheers. Why don't you take me back to the beginning of your Fresh Starts journey?
Sure. So I would say it really began in December of 2020. And we were coming off of, as we all know, a long pandemic at that point, 9 months. I have 3 children, they were not in school, they were at home. I had been at a fintech, financial technology company for almost 15 years at that point. I had started, in customer success. I moved up into product manager. And at that point, I was at the executive level. The pandemic had been hard. And throughout that experience, it made me think, as a lot of people, and it's going to sound cliche, but it made me think about, what do I really want? I've been doing this for so long. Now I'm doing it through the hardest thing that nobody could predict. Is this what I want to keep doing? And part of that was the people that I worked with. They were difficult. And they had always been difficult. And it was part of the work culture was to kind of be around what I would now call toxic people. But I just kind of went through it. But going through the pandemic and parenting and all of that, I'm like, I can't take this anymore. Yeah. I don't want to be around people that make me unhappy. I'm doing enough with my kids. So probably in October of 2020, I thought, well, what else can I do in my life? I had literally never heard of content marketing before, but I had always considered myself a writer. And so I thought, well, maybe that's something I can do. So I started freelancing on the side because I needed one more thing on top of having my kids home and working a full-time job.
Yeah.
But I realized very quickly that nobody would hire me without a portfolio. So I started doing some freelance writing. By December of that year, I was getting to the point where I was like, okay, how much more time do I want to put into this job? When do I want to make the leap and just rip the Band-Aid off and start over? And there was one day in December where I got into it with the CEO and just pushed back. He was being ridiculous about something. And I was like, I can't take this anymore. I didn't quit on the spot, but I said, this is it. I'm going to be done in January. I am going to get through the holiday season. I am going to be done in January. That is the day that I remember very clearly knowing that was it. Later that evening, I got a call that my grandma had died. I thought she and I both made a decision to move on that day. Truly, we did. And so when I got that call, I was like, there's a reason that I made that decision today, that this was, and really pushed me to say, I'm going to start over, I'm going to do something else.
You've been working in fintech for 15 years, you said. You have 3 kids, but there's no way that I can imagine how old you are. I say this because Olivia and I have been talking a lot in our personal lives about uninterrogated decisions that we make in our early 20s. The decision to go into a certain field and before our brains are fully formed. And then you get to your late 30s and you're like, wait, why am I doing this? Like, is this something I want to do? And I wonder if you sort of had that feeling, what the decision to initially go into fintech was based in, and how it felt to really sort of look at your life and be like, wait, this isn't where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And you're kind of what you're alluding to, I think, is exactly what it was for me. I graduated from college with an English degree. And at that time, like digital writing wasn't a thing, online writing wasn't a thing. I'm old enough. And,
no, it wasn't.
So, I was like, what do I want to do with that? I love writing, but I don't want to write a novel. That didn't feel like the thing. I didn't really want to be a journalist because local journalism was kind of still or national journalism. That's kind of it.
Yeah.
And I had worked at a bank in high school and in college. I was a bank teller and then worked in loan ops. That was just my job. And I was like, okay, so I don't hate banking. I liked it. I was interested in community banking in particular. And so I actually ended up, the fintech that I went to was a software that I had used at the bank that I worked at. And so it just seemed like logical.
Natural progression.
It was just, and then it was like, okay, now I need to climb the ladder at this company. And now I need to keep doing this thing and that thing and get to the top.
Right.
And it turns out the top wasn't where I wanted to be after all. It didn't fulfill me in the way that I thought it would.
You didn't know yourself. You were a child when you started making those choices, and it's hard to know what's going to fulfill you in 15 years.
And also feeling like I need a stable job with, like self-employment. Even now, my parents kind of look at me like, what? Because there are a lot of preconceptions, especially from 15 years ago.
Right.
What does it mean to be self-employed? What does it mean to go out and do something for yourself? I never would have thought of that ever back then. And now it's, of course, that's what I would do.
Yeah, it wasn't really an option back then because I was in the same boat. I mean, I went into teaching because I didn't know what else really to do. And then, digital marketing wasn't a thing. And like I say this all the time, I knew I wanted to be in marketing, but there was no options besides agency work, right? And I didn't want to be in an agency in New York City. So I went into teaching, right? And then 10 years later, I realized I don't want to be a teacher, right? So I very much understand that. What is it? Now, I have 2 kids and I have some serious PTSD from the pandemic and have been with my children in terms of schooling and working and owning an agency, all the things. What was it like, being in fintech, and did you always work from home? And how was it, having 3 children over that span of growing your success at the fintech side company?
Fintech, I had been remote at the fintech since 6 months after I started. So
Wow.
4.5 years ago. The rest of the company went fully remote in 2010. So that part wasn't new. What I was not used to was having 3 little coworkers at home. Because I worked very traditional hours. They went to daycare, then they went to elementary school. And so I had never even attempted to work with them around, other than the occasional oddball sick day. I was lucky that at the point when the pandemic hit, because I was at the executive level, I did have a lot of flexibility in terms of I wasn't on a ton of client meetings. A lot of the work was internal and managing a team. But my team was suffering. I mean, they were like the front lines of customer support and trying to manage customer expectations while they all had children at home. So I felt that very deeply on behalf of my team, and the CEO didn't get it. He had a grown child and one child. And so he was like, well, why is this so, why aren't things back to normal around July? It was kind of like, why isn't just everything back to normal? I'm like, well, not only is my team still really struggling with this, but our clients, they have children. Some of them have kids at home. Like, that's why things still feel weird all the time.
And it was your boss was a he too. So I'm sure even if his daughter or his child had been home, there was somebody else that was sort of making sure she was staying out of dad's office, you know?
Probably. That would be my, so right. His concept of like, what is it like to work while a child is, right next to you and asking you for something, or interrupting your Zoom meeting or whatever. Like, he didn't really get like how stressful that was, especially for people who really did want to do good work. And get their jobs done, and like couldn't, always felt like they were failing all the time.
And I think that I think that mothers specifically are still recovering from that period of time. And I think that there's another point here, which is that we are constantly worried as women about being judged in the workplace, right? We're not enough. We're not smart enough. We're not doing the business enough. Then to add in the layer of you have a child in the background who needs to poop, and you're like, but I'm on a Zoom call, and what am I going to do? Leave my kid covered in poop, or get on the, what's the decision? And you were never enough, especially during that time, to your children, and you were never enough to your bosses and your clients, and you just felt like a failure across the board. And I remember there was that news clip of that reporter, and he was on a Zoom call, and then his kid walked in the room, and everybody's like, oh, that's so cute, that's so funny. And I'm thinking, if that was a woman, everybody would have been like, what a failure, right? Her kid walked in the room, she can't do her job. So the stress level we were all under as mothers during that time, probably I'm guessing, like, added to your element of like, this is not working.
And my husband he's great. And he had been remote before the pandemic as well, but there's just a different level of expectation. Like you pointed out, calls he was on and the participation level that he was expected to have versus what I was expected to do.
Right.
Like, I was expected to somehow just figure it out. When the teachers and bless the teachers, they did amazing. But they'd email me during the day, hey, your kid didn't show up for music Zoom class, can you find out where they are? I'm like, I don't know where they are.
right
somewhere in the house, I hope. I guess
the emails always came to me, and never to both of us, for both of us to figure out who could figure out where the kid was. So it was just constant. I always felt like I was, and it was hard because I had never felt like a failure as a parent before. Really had always been a fairly confident parent, maybe to a fault. And that really just like ripped me apart and made me feel like I couldn't do anything. And then add to that, that's really what triggered that I need a change in my career, is like, I can't take this. I can't take this level of stress in my home on top of stress that I'm experiencing in my job.
So you started writing, and what were you looking to do, like content for? What kind of writing were you doing? How did you fill your portfolio?
So immediately, I quit without anything lined up.
But our favorite
type of quitting over here.
It's my favorite type.
I did. But I was in the final stages of interviewing, but I picked a date in my head. I had a meeting with my boss. It was a regularly scheduled touch base. She was the COO of the company. And I thought, I don't want to catch her off guard. So I'm just going to use this date that's already on the calendar. And that is my last day.
Mm-hmm.
That is the day I'm going to tell her, not my last day.
Mm-hmm.
That's the day, whether I have a job or not. Turns out I got an offer to be a contributing editor in a industry publication, and I got an offer to work at a content marketing agency.
That's awesome.
I took both because the editing thing was kind of freelance, and so I was full-time at an agency.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for about 8 months. So that did get some great clients in my portfolio. That was not a good fit for me either. Writing that type of writing and that intensity of writing was not good. So I left there and I went to another agency as an account manager. And I, had done relationship management before. So I was at that agency for about a year, and then realized I need to be on my own. I think it was residual burnout. I just need to really have full control over what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And being at an agency, it wasn't it. By that point, I built up enough of a portfolio that I've been able to get clients and work that I enjoy doing.
Life is short, and to have your decision to move on coincide with the passing of your grandmother is a really stark reminder of that. And we get one go around, as far as we know, we get one go around in this body, right? And so you have to pursue that, like the things that feel good. And I've been at companies before where it just does not feel like the right fit. Like it's a really important thing to know when to move on and to know like what you need to just be able to heal that burnout on your own.
People talk about burnout, and I think a lot of people don't realize how long it can last and how much. Like I felt at the second agency I was at, I felt like I wasn't doing good work. I'm like, I can't be kind of the best person or the work that I know I'm capable of doing. And partly it was a bad fit. It wasn't a good job for me. But then on top of that, I was still recovering from truly some toxic work environments. And I didn't realize it put me on guard all the time. And I knew that the thing for me was just to go out and be on my own and have the most control over the outcome and what I wanted.
Tell us about the relationship with your grandmother, because I can feel that there's something there.
So she was amazing. She was 100 years old when she passed away. Very sadly, because of the pandemic, I wasn't able to be with her. She was in a memory care unit. And so they were really limited on who could visit. She went to school for orthopedics, I think. And so she went to school for that. She went to college. She practiced for a while. She married my grandfather. They were pen pals during World War II.
Oh, I love that.
I know. So the first time they met in person, he proposed, and she said, "No, stupid." She's like, we just met, like in person. But then they did get married.
Yeah.
They traveled the world. My grandfather ended up going into the foreign service. So so from the time they were in their early 20s until their late 50s, they lived all over the world. So her life experience was just drastically different than most people.
Right.
And she never stopped talking about those experiences. And she wrote about them. She put a whole memoir together for her family of everything she could remember. And my family, we're all kind of varying levels of sharing stories. And so we all email each other. And she was still typing emails like into her 90s until she physically couldn't anymore. So she was always just fiercely protective of her family. And I think a lot of that came from living outside of the United States and always kind of feeling like, when you're in a different country and you don't speak the language and all of that, you just have to protect, your kids and their experience and things like that. And so I really admire her. She was my last living grandparent. And so she was just really, really important to me.
Yeah, I can tell. What did you learn from her that you take through your journey and your fresh starts?
She just always tried new things because she lived in all of these different countries. And sometimes they'd move every 6 months. Sometimes they'd move every couple of years. And she'd do whatever she could to kind of immerse herself in the culture. They lived in Southeast Asia. They lived in South Africa. They lived in Egypt, Syria. They were all over. And so she never shied away from trying new things. and she was also a weaver. Like she wove these intricate things. It's like, that's something that not everybody does. And she did that. And so but she would always just go all in. Like, I'm not going to just learn to weave a little bit. I'm going to just be amazing at this.
Yeah.
And so that I think that's just her willingness to just dive in, go head first, like embrace the internet age. And I'm going to be on email. Everybody else is on email. I'm going to be on email.
And it sounds like she was a writer.
She was. She enjoyed it just kind of as a pastime. She was like I call it a documentarian. She liked to document her life. So she documented her life just by, writing out everything she could remember from the Foreign Service. She and my grandfather continued to write to their family back in the States. So I have stacks of letters that they would write. And, she wanted to capture like what was going on in her life, and it was really stream of consciousness. Whatever came into her head came out on paper. But yeah, so I think, that part I definitely take also. Like I want to kind of chronicle what's going on in my life all the time, whether blog and things like that. So
I love that. Our grandmother was very similar in what she did. And something I learned from her was that it's really important to give yourself the space to have drafts, right?
Yeah.
There's always room for a first draft. And I think that that's like what fresh starts are all about, right? Like you don't know until you try. And so, you can just keep writing drafts and drafts, and nobody needs to know about the other drafts, right? They don't see the final product until you decide to show them the final product. So that being said, what was it like going out on your own and starting your own business and, becoming an entrepreneur for the first time?
So I'll admit that it was an okay transition because I had been freelancing for about 2 years by that point and maintained just a couple of clients on the side. So I had systems in place. I mentioned I'm a workflow productivity geek. So I thought I can do this because I just need to scale. I just need to get more clients. So in that regard, I think I was lucky that I didn't just cold turkey leave and decide to go out on my own. So that part's been good. It's just been, getting that full roster of clients. I'm pretty much at capacity now. So I think I was ready. It was the right time to kind of really make that decision.
Do you have any like go-to workflow productivity geek recommendations? Like, do you have a tip when people ask you? Because I would call myself like a hopeful workflow productivity geek. I love that stuff. I love automating things, and I love, efficiency. Efficiency is my thing. So I'm curious, like, if you have any like go-to tips that you offer.
I'm a Zapier girl.
I just got into Zapier. I'm just like dipping my toe in the water. So go on.
Yes. So I basically all of my systems are connected behind this. So I'm using Trello is what I use for project management when I get requests from different clients. So I have a whole workflow set up where clients submit a brief to me via a form. If they send it via email, I just plug it into the form. But then behind the scenes, it creates a Google Doc for me with information from the brief. Zapier does that. And then it puts the due date into Trello for me. It creates a card in Trello for me, and it links the Google Doc back to the Trello card so that when I'm working in Trello, I can just easily click over to my draft that I'm doing. So it saves like a couple of minutes or more per brief, but that just adds up over time. It's just manual work. And when you're like a team of one, so I have things like that running behind the scenes all the time. I can just save time, and it feels like, I could get a lot done because I'm not doing some of that little stuff in the background.
Oh, 100%. Like that. Like I said, I just started with Zapier. Setting up those automations is so exciting for people that love efficiency, but then also to make it feel like magic, and to make it feel like you said, when you're a small team or a team of one, that you just show up and things are there for you. It's like you have a pretend assistant that, is making it happen.
Yeah. I do say it's like my pretend assistant. Like it's just stuff, I have stuff automated with my social media and with repurposing things. I've got all kinds of stuff, which are things that are important for my business, things that would take me time to do.
Yeah. Every moment that you can get back is a moment that you can dedicate towards the work or self-care or your children or your husband. Like, it all takes energy. And it reminds me of like Steve Jobs, and the black turtleneck, because it's like when you're taking out those things, those small things that take a little bit of energy, it all goes back to you.
I feel like you're very creative, and there's things that you do, and I don't know, I'm just taking a guess here, but like there's a side of you that's creative that you don't talk about much. I'm like picking up on something there.
So, I do work for clients that's work that pays the bills. I mean, I enjoy it. I try to do work that I have, but I have maintained a blog and a Substack, and I'm on Medium, and that's the writing that's me. That's the work that I enjoy. Part of that is talking about tools and automation because I love sharing tips and things like that. Part of that is talking more about my personal life on my blog. And so those are things that are just kind of in the background, but working for myself has given me the time to do those things when I didn't before, or not nearly as much. I have a lot more control over my time.
Right. Yeah. And I imagine that's much more fulfilling to your soul.
Oh yeah. I'm able to do so much more writing of my own now than I was ever able to do before.
Yeah. And that is something, as a writer, I know that if you don't have that space in your life, you suffer mentally from not being able to get those words out into the world. Even if nobody's reading them but you, it's like it's stuck, and it really affects you to not be able to write when you need to write. It
was kind of, I've had a blog for like ever, and it was always just kind of, when am I going to find the time? I mean, it was important to me to write in it, but a lot of times it would get neglected for long periods of time.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, now I actually have time built into my day, built into my week to write on different places and for different reasons. Some of it's more for me. Some of it's, in my Substack, I rail about corporate awfulness in some cases and remote work and things like that. Those are just topics that I'm passionate about. And so like to write about them. So I just have a lot more space to really talk about the things that I want to.
Well, and when you're an efficient person too, working in an office is very hard because you're expected to be there for certain hours a day. And if you're anything like me, you probably finished your work, and like very efficiently. And then you go to remote and you're still expected to be there certain hours a day, at your desk. But then once you're freelance, like you really get to structure that day of when you work best and, when you get to do those things, and you get to add in the personal like writing and stuff like that. So I think being an efficient person and being able to work for yourself they go hand in hand, because I'm sure you've gotten back a lot of time just not working like a traditional 40-hour work week.
The fintech that I was at worked very flexibly. That was part of the way that everybody did. And so other than the client facing people, but I was able to gain a lot of flexibility there. When I moved to agency, I actually took a step backwards. So even though I was still remote, it was very synchronous. And that felt very confining to me. I was like, I'd get Slack messages or like, hey, can you blah, blah, blah this? I'm like, well, no, I'm at the grocery store. But I realized that other people weren't doing that. People were kind of focusing. It wasn't like a requirement, but it was just kind of and probably an expectation type of thing. It's that we all work, mostly synchronous, mostly the bulk of the middle of the day. And I just hadn't worked that way in a long time, and wasn't used to it. So, again, with why do I go out on my own? It wasn't just the work itself. It was also, I'm sure there are companies out there that would still be as flexible as what I was used to, but finding that combination of non-toxic work I love, flexibility I love, I didn't see it.
No.
Yeah. And if you can do it on your own, like, I don't know, especially if you're capable of like doing your taxes and finding health insurance and things like that, like why bother going to find that?
The idea of looking again for a job, I was just like, I can't do that right now. So I told my husband, I'm like, I'm going to do freelancing for at least 6 months. We'll see how it goes. And it's been going really well. So I can't imagine.
No, it's very hard to imagine going back once you've done for yourself. Yeah.
I know.
So for anybody that's listening that, is looking to make a career pivot or a job change or a major life fresh start, what would you say to them?
I would say it depends on how much risk you want to take and how you go about it. I've been, a little bit risk averse my entire life, which is why I started freelancing on the side before I finally quit my job. And I was okay with that. I also made the decision, like, I'm going to quit whether I have something else lined up or not.
Right.
So it's kind of this balance of definitely do it and just decide how much you can tolerate. Can you tolerate being in the end stage of an interview if you're going to another job? Do you want to save up a little money so you can tolerate, being unemployed or not having the freelance clients you want? So I say absolutely do it and just figure out what you need to do to get there based on your own, what do you need at that point in your life?
I love that. Well, thank you for chatting with us today and sharing all of your amazing, I love that, like, the journey that you took in your career and doing this all during a pandemic and, all the other things.
For the kids.
And how I love that you ultimately kind of came back to yourself, right? You came back to what filled your soul. We were very close to our grandmother. She was kind of our third musketeer. And, so we very much understand that the power of your grandmother's prayers beyond her earthly, walking, and how it helps to remember, like, that she took the risks. And so we can take the risks too. And it really does help, to think of these women in our past who have, done all these things without Zapier and without MailChimp. Right?
But I wouldn't want to do it without Zapier.
And they did it and succeeded. And I hope that you publish a book of those letters, because wow, what a powerful piece of content. Talk about content marketing, all these letters and
I feel like you could set up a really good Zap to, like, scan and, like, OCR and,
Yeah, it's on my list. I really would love to bring her story to the world because it is such a unique one and I have so much material about it. So someday, yes.
Yeah, we're rooting for that. Yeah, we would love to read that. We're rooting for that. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for sharing your journey and your honesty and your authenticity. Thank you for listening to today's story. We're always here and we're proud of you. Until next time, brave one.
A Fresh Story is brought to you by Fresh Starts Registry, the first and only platform for everything you need to start again. You can read the show notes and learn more about today's episode at freshstartsregistry.com/podcast.